And so, we begin. One Christmas was so much like another. In those years around the sea town gone are now, and out of all sound except the distant speaking of the voices, I sometimes hear a moment before sleep. That I can never remember whether it snowed for 6 days and 6 nights when I was 12, or whether it snowed for 12 days and 12 nights when I was 6. All the Christmases rolled down towards the two-tongued sea like a cold and headlong moon bundling down the sky that was our street. And I plunge my hands into the snow and bring out whatever I can find. In goes my hand into that wool-white bell-tongued ball of holidays resting at the rim of the carol-singing sea, and out come Mrs. Prothero and the fireman. It was on the afternoon of the day of Christmas Eve, and I was in Mrs. Prothero's garden, waiting for cats, with her son Jim. It was snowing. It was always snowing at Christmas. December in my memory is as white as Lapland, though there were no reindeer, but there were cats. Patient, cold and callous, our hands wrapped in socks, we waited to snowball the cats. Long and sleek as jaguars, spitting and snarling, they would slink and sidle over the back garden wall. And the lynx-eyed hunters, Jim and I, fur-capped and moccasined rappers from Hudson Bay off Mumbles Road, would wait to hurl our deadly snowballs at the green of their eyes. The wise cats never appeared. We were so still, Eskimo-footed Arctic marksmen in the muffling silence of the eternal snows, eternal ever since Wednesday, that we never heard Mrs. Prothero's first cry from her igloo at the bottom of the garden, or if we heard it at all, it was to us the distant challenge of our enemy and prey, the neighbor's polar cat. But then the voices grew louder. "Fire!" cried Mrs. Prothero, and she beat the dinner gong. And we ran down to the house, snowballs in our arms, and smoke indeed was pouring out of the dining room, and the gong was bombulating, and Mrs. Prothero was announcing ruin like the town crier of Pompeii. This was better than all the cats in Wales standing on the wall in a row. "Call the firemen!" cried Mrs. Prothero. "They won't be there, it's Christmas," said Mr. Prothero. "Do something," she said. So we threw our snowballs into the smoke. I think we missed Mr. Prothero, and we ran down to the telephone box. And soon the firemen came and brought a hose into the house. And Mr. Prothero got out just in time before they turned it on. Nobody could have had a noisier Christmas Eve. And when the fireman turned off the hose and was standing in the wet, smoky room, Jim's aunt, Miss Prothero, came downstairs and peered in at them. Jim and I waited very quietly to hear what she would say to them. She said the right thing always. She looked at the 3 tall firemen in their shining helmets, standing among the smoke and cinders and dissolving snowballs, and she said, "Would you like anything to read?" Years and years and years ago, when I was a boy, when there were wolves in Wales, when birds the colour of red flannel petticoats whisked past the harp-shaped hills, when we sang and wallowed all night and day in caves that smelt like Sunday afternoons in damp front farmhouse parlours, when we chased with the jawbones of deacons, the English and the bears, before the motor car, before the wheel, before the Duchess-faced horse, when we rode the daft and happy hills bareback, it snowed and it snowed. Ah, but here, a small boy says, "It snowed last year too. I built a snowman, and my brother knocked it down, and I knocked my brother down, and then we had tea, Oh, but that was not the same snow, I say. Our snow was not only shaken from the whitewashed buckets down the sky, it came shoaling out of the ground and swam and drifted out of the arms and hands and bodies of the trees. Snow grew overnight on the roofs of houses like a pure and grandfather moss. Minutely ivied the walls and settled on the postman opening the gate like a dumb, numb thunderstorm of white-torn Christmas cards. Were there postmen then too? With sprinkling eyes and wind-cherried noses, on broad frozen feet they crunched up to the doors and mittened on them manfully. But all the children could hear was the ringing of bells. You mean the postman went rat-a-tat-tat and the doors rang? I mean that the bells the children could hear were inside them. I only hear thunder sometimes, never bells. There were church bells too. Inside them? No. In the black snow-white belfries, tugged by bishops and storks, and they rang their tidings all over the bandaged town. Over the frozen foam of the powder and ice cream hills, over the crackling sea. It seemed that all the churches boomed for joy under my window, and the weathercocks crew for Christmas on our fences. Get back to the postman. They were just ordinary postmen, fond of walking and dogs and Christmas in the snow. They knocked on the doors with blue knuckles, and ours has a black knocker. And they stood on the white welcome mat in the little drifted porches and huffed and puffed, making ghosts with their breath, and jogged from foot to foot like small boys wanting to go out. And then the presents? And then the presents, after the Christmas box. And the cold postman, with a rose on his button nose, tingled down the tea-tray slithered run of the chilly glinting hill. He went on his ice-bound boots like a man on a fishmonger's slabs. He wagged his bag like a frozen camel's hump, dizzily turned a corner at one foot, and by God, he was gone. Get back to the presents. They were the useful presents, engulfing mufflers of the old coach days, and mittens made for giant sloths, zebra scarves of a substance like silky gum that could be tug-of-war down to the galoshes, blinding tam o' shanties like patchwork tea cozies, and bunny-suited busbies. And balaclavas for victims of head-shrinking tribes. For aunts who always wore wool next to the skin, there were mustached and rasping vests that made you wonder why the aunts had any skin left on them at all. And once I had a little crocheted nose bag from an aunt, unfortunately no longer whinnying with us. And pictureless books in which small boys who were warned with quotations not to would skate on Farmer Giles's pond, and did, and drowned. And books that told me everything about the wasp, except the why. Go on to the useless presents. Oh, bags of moist and many-coloured jelly babies, and a folded flag, and a false nose, and a tram conductor's cap, and a machine that punched tickets and rang a bell. Never a catapult. Once, by mistake, that no one could explain, a tiny hatchet. And a celluloid duck that made, when you pressed it, a most unduck-like sound. A mewing moo that an ambitious cat might make who wished to be a cow. And a painting book in which I could make the grass, the trees, the sea, and the animals and sky any colour I pleased. And still, the dazzling sky blue sheep are grazing in the red field under the rainbow-billed and pea-green birds. Hard-boils, toffees, fudge and all sorts, crunches, cracknels, humbugs, glaciers, marzipan and butter Welsh for the Welsh. And troops of bright tin soldiers who, if they could not fight, could always run. And snakes and families and happy ladders and easy hobby games for little engineers, complete with instructions, or easy for Leonardo, maybe. and a whistle to make the dogs bark, to wake up old man next door, to make him beat on the wall with his stick and shake our picture off the wall. And a packet of cigarettes. You put one in your mouth and you stood on the corner of the street and you waited for hours in vain for an old lady to scold you for smoking a cigarette. And then, with a smirk, you ate it. And then it was breakfast under the balloons. Bring out your tall tales now, that were told by the fire, as the gaslight bubbled like a diver. Ghosts hooed like owls in the long nights, when I dared not look over my shoulder. Animals lurked in the cubbyhole under the stairs, and the gas meter ticked. And I remember once that we went singing carols, where there wasn't the shaving of a moon to light the flying streets. At the end of a long road was a drive that led to a large house, and we stumbled up the darkness of the drive that night, each one of us afraid, each one of us holding a stone, just in case. Each one of us, and all of us, too brave to say a word. The wind through the trees made noises as of old and unpleasant, and maybe web-footed men wheezing in caves. We reached the black bulk of the house. What shall we give them? Hark the herald? No, said Jack. Good King Wenceslas, I'll count to 3. 1, 2, 3. And we began to sing. Our voices high and seemingly distant in the snow-felted darkness round the house that was occupied by nobody we knew. We stood close together near the dark door. Good King Wenceslas looked out on the feast of season. And then a small voice, a small dry voice, like the voice of someone who had not spoken for a very long time, joined our singing. A small, dry, eggshell voice from the other side of the door. A small, dry voice through the keyhole. And when we stopped running, we were outside our house. And the front room was lovely. Balloons floated under the hot water bottle, gulping gas. Everything was good again and shone over the town. Perhaps it was a ghost, said Jim. Perhaps it was trolls, Dan said, who was always reading. Let's go in and see if there's any jelly left, Jack said. And we did that. Always on Christmas night, there was music. There was music. An uncle played the fiddle, a cousin sang Cherry Ripe, and another uncle sang Drake's Drum. It was very warm in the little house. Auntie Hannah, who had got onto the parsnip wine, sang a song about bleeding hearts and death. And then another in which she said her heart was like a bird's nest. And then everybody laughed again. And then I went to bed. Looking through my bedroom window, out into the moonlight, and the unending smoke-coloured snow, I could see the lights in the windows of all the other houses on our hill, and hear the music rising from them up the long, steady falling night. I turned the gas down. I got into bed. I said some words to the close and holy darkness, and then I slept. That was Dylan Thomas's A Child's Christmas in Wales, and it's been my pleasure to read it to you here at Sitka Books. And I will leave with, please support your independent bookstores because they're a dying breed, and Merry Christmas to everyone.
Thank you very much.